Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tech and Soul podcast. I am Tameka Key.
And I am Lynn D. Johnson.
And today we're super excited because we have a guest, and it is Mr. Myles Younger.
Hello. I am
Hi.
super happy to be here. This is going to be really fun.
It is. Myles, Lynn and I have known Myles in various iterations of our careers, right? Both from Ad Monsters, and then before that, I think at wherever the heck I was before that. And wherever the heck Myles was before that. Myles, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Hey, yeah, sure. So I am head of insights and innovation at U of Digital. So U of Digital is a training and education partner for the digital marketing and advertising and media space. I've been there around a year and a half. And so my role is around kind of staying ahead of just key topics and trends in the industry that our clients, are asking us to train them on. And then also just kind of as head of product as U of Digital builds out its digital product suite. Before that, I was at Mighty Hive and Media Monks for a total of 5 years doing kind of the agency consulting thing. And then prior to that, like I started my career just in B2B marketing. I worked for a couple different companies on, various B2B marketing teams. And so that, goes back to what, 2003, 2004. So like I've been in the industry like around 20 years or so.
It's crazy when I think of the same thing. And I'm like, wait, how have I been? Isn't it still 1990? No, it's not. It is not.
It is not at all. And Myles, I think, right? So Media Monks, you were at Media Monks when I came to know you, and you wrote a couple of articles for me. And I think one thing that we have in common that other people kind of take us to task over is our belief in the zero party data idea.
Absolutely.
Right. But I think that the way that you define it is a lot different than how people are thinking of it. Because I know like people used to make fun of me like, ooh, surveys, zero party data. And I'm like, dudes, it's more to it than that. And I know we're going to talk about a whole bunch of other things, but I think that this zero party data concept will become a lot more critical
Oh,
in where the future is going, right?
absolutely. No, and yes, you are the probably chief person in the industry that I can count on to like be my zero party data ally and not laugh at me or I don't laugh at you. Uh there aren't that many of us.
Well, I mean, I think let's go with the elephant in the room. How do you both, I mean, we could have this entire conversation, which I think is a great segue into the next piece, but how do y'all define zero party data? Because everyone is let's be clear, everyone is very much like first party data is the gold standard now. Why, if you can, what is the distinction between zero and first party, and why does that matter?
Lynn, I can
You should do it because you wrote a whole article about it, and
That's right, I
I
did.
think some proof came about it recently as we've been talking about the privacy sandbox.
Yes, and that's the number one example that I always offer up. So my shorthand way of describing zero party data is you think of degrees of separation from the consumer. So first party data is 1 degree separated from the consumer. If I share data with Walmart, now Walmart has it. I don't have it. It's 1 degree
Okay.
separated from me. Walmart then, I don't know. I mean, they just bought Vizio, but whatever. They partner with Vizio.
Haven't
Then
got it yet. The
well,
deal
okay,
Not
has
all
not
yet.
right.
closed, which
Hasn't
is
been approved.
separate. That's a whole separate thing.
Fair enough. Okay, so yeah, so they do something with Vizio, then it becomes second party because now it's 2 degrees. It's made 2 hops for me. Third party, of course, is just like blowing the lid off things, and that could be anybody who manages to either observe my behavior online or buy my data from somebody else. And so zero party never leaves. It's just, and this is in sort of my definition, Lynn. There's the other kind of, and I don't think they're incompatible, but there's the other definition where it's volunteered data. So it's like first party data that was volunteered by somebody. Declared data, I guess, is another name for
Yeah,
it.
that's the way.
But zero party data, if it's 0 steps removed from you, that means you still have it. Nobody else has it. And I think this is a great place where Privacy Sandbox comes in, where some parts of Privacy Sandbox are running parts of whatever the digital advertising food chain directly on your machine, directly in your browser, so that your data never has to leave to some ad tech company's data center in order to be acted upon. Like your data can be acted upon without ever leaving your machine. And so that's one of like the revolutionary parts of Privacy Sandbox. Lynn, you Ad Monsters did a webinar a million years ago with, I can't remember the guy's name from, oh my goodness. They do like sort of data enrichment for publishers. It's like a tag that sits on the page.
Oh,
Why am I not thinking of the
gotcha.
name?
Oh,
But
oh,
anyway,
They're in,
yeah.
the guy's based in Florida, the little sales guy. What's his name? Oh my God. Is it anyway?
anyway,
Will come back to us.
this guest of yours on this podcast had another great example of zero party data, which I think is maybe easier for people to connect with, is when you unlock your iPhone with your fingerprint is not sitting in an Apple data center. Apple does not want your fingerprint. That's a huge liability for them to have that information. And so your fingerprint still sits on your phone, and Apple's able to authenticate your phone via some other means, but your actual fingerprint itself never actually leaves your phone for that type of authentication. So it stays as zero party data because it's a very sensitive piece of data, and there's no real need for it to leave in order for Apple to do the job that it needs to do, which is unlock your phone. Anyway, I don't know, Tameka, I want all the skeptical questions here.
But here's the skeptical question about Privacy Sandbox. Isn't part of the problem there with it being in the browser that people fear that it could still be accessed, right? Because it's in the browser.
I mean, in the browser, so again, I am not super deep in Privacy Sandbox land anymore. I'm sort of off in measurement land, which is its own issue, right? But the concept of this interaction happening within my browser and on my device itself and not going somewhere else, I mean, that takes, I almost want to go back to like, is the connection to like the Flash days, like Adobe Flash, where you have these things happening in, you have these sort of these things, what is the word? I don't even know what the word is, but that's in my head. Is it, are we going back to something, to an era of Flash where things are actually happening in my browser and on my machine? I thought the whole reason we got away from that was problematic.
That's an interesting connection. I hadn't made that connection, but that is an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, I don't profess to be bullish on all parts of Privacy Sandbox.
Okay.
I am much more bullish on things around after the fact measurement, frequency capping, sort of private audiences for publishers, things like that. In terms of like running ad auctions on the browser, maybe Google will be successful with that. I am not as bullish on that. I'm more bullish on the other parts of Privacy Sandbox, and I think those parts are going to have a lot more utility for the industry over the long term.
So that's a good segue then, because we're talking about sort of short term, long term. We talked about Flash, which went away, right? Which was Web 1.0, if admittedly, right? Then we move into this era of Web 2.0, which is definitely, let's say, ad tech. It's powered by cookies, right? It's powered by second, third party data. It's powered by first party data on some levels. So we move to this new era, and we can't say Web 3 anymore because the little crypto bros are all in shambles.
They ruined it.
But if we're moving to this era of sort of Privacy Sandbox, we're moving to this era of a place where there are no cookies. We're moving to this era where users are cognizant of these interactions and transactions that are happening on their devices, and they either want to be compensated for them, or they're sort of becoming more choosy about who they give their data to. What does the web look like? And from a bunch of levels, what does the web look like from a publisher standpoint? What does the web look like from an advertiser standpoint? And then what does the web look like from a career standpoint, from the people that are in the roles that, for example, Myles, you have digital is training salespeople. You have digital is training you know, we have graphic designers, we have all of these people. So yeah, so answer all of those questions, Myles, please.
How can he answer all of them at one time? I'll give a little bit of direction, because where she started with people now understanding that their data was being misused, and now they may want to take some control of it. And I know, Myles, you were on a session that I had put together with someone from a company called Big Token. And so there's like Big Token and
Oh my God,
Reclaim,
I remember this.
and
Yeah.
there was Streamlytics, and there's a couple of other companies like this that are helping consumers to own their data. And then there's also like Locker, which is identity agnostic, that is trying to help a user just have like this one email that you use on everything, and then right, so it's like the user is in control, right, is empowered. And you know that, Tameka, you said you remember that session. There was a lot of cantankerousness. I couldn't think of a good word there on that session. Do you want to speak to that aspect of it first, Myles? What do you think about? Are people really that cognizant as we're making it out to be, as like these Apple ads scare us into thinking?
So let's just take the Apple ads. And this is also on the topic of the cantankerousness is so. No, you have some people in, generally in the ad tech industry. And I'm not even saying this in a, I don't know, derogatory way. I think the world's gonna just change how it changes, and it's not gonna matter what any of us think. Is they say, oh, well, if it wasn't for Apple, Apple has this very cynical agenda where they are trying to sort of simultaneously convince everyone that some prior like data sharing paradigm was privacy invasive. Okay, third-party cookies tracking you, and app makers tracking you across apps, using your advertising ID from your iPhone, et cetera, while simultaneously like probably building their own walled garden. And it's like all this stuff is okay. It's okay for if Apple does it, but it's not okay if anybody else does it. And so even if so it's like a very cynical kind of backstory to the publicity push that they've been doing for a couple of years around Apple equals privacy, or whatever their kind of taglines have been. And to me, I'm like, well, what does it matter if they change consumer perception, and they're very effective at changing consumer perception? There's almost no company on earth that is better at steering consumer perception than Apple. And that's why they have a whatever $3 trillion market cap. Is like literally, it doesn't get much better than that. And I'm like, well, if they steer consumer perception that people want more protections around their data, then people want more protections around their data. Who cares if it was because of a cynical ad campaign?
Right.
And so, but people get cantankerous about that, because they say, yeah, but if Apple wasn't doing that, but Apple is. Perceptions are changing. And even before that, I mean, people used to use ad blockers,
That existed.
Yeah, that existed long before Apple cared anything about all of this. And yes, it was sort of like a subset of internet users. But in my experience, and maybe it's because we all work in the digital industry, I was always kind of surprised at how many people I would meet who used ad blockers and used VPNs, just people from kind of everyday life that you're like, oh, this isn't just like a couple of like nerds who live in their basement. This is actually a bunch of people out there who found out about this technology. Maybe those ads for those VPNs are all over like YouTube. Every single YouTube creator and podcast is sponsored by a VPN now. And so it's not, again, this gets back to the fact that like, it's a two-way street of what is it that people want, and what are the perceptions that they are being, how are they being influenced by private industry, by VPN makers, by Apple? And I say it doesn't matter. If people kind of are their general attitudes around privacy shift, then they've shifted, and there's nothing ad tech can do about that. We're all going to have to conform to it one way or another.
I love that you made the connection to VPNs. I didn't even think about that, because again, if we talk about Web 1.0 and 2.0 and 3, and that's just how I'm going to frame this entire episode. I mean, think of a VPN, not even from a privacy and data standpoint. It's like if you went to another country and you wanted to watch Netflix or you wanted to watch a video, you had to use a VPN because they were geo-targeting, right? And they're like, you can't access content. So in that way, I think consumers have always been, well, let's say slightly more tech-savvy consumers have always been cognizant of privacy. But I mean, and I do think we are a subset, but when it becomes enough of the cultural zeitgeist that someone like, and I think we always use these analogies, my mom, someone like my mom who's not super tech savvy, my mom, like it took her like 15 years to be comfortable using like the Bank of America app, but like to the point where my mom is like, oh honey, if I log into this, are these, are they tracking me? Like she doesn't know all the details, right? Knows what tracking means. And so that I agree. I think we've passed the point of, oh, it's not an issue, or oh, people. I do think the issue of whether Apple's building its own walled garden becomes another issue, right? But I don't think I don't think it matters whether their campaign was altruistic or not. Their campaign, in addition to a bunch of other things, worked.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's also an aspect of this where ad tech in particular, and I used to be this way. So it's like part of my understanding of this comes from like the way that my own thinking about this has evolved. Because there was a time, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago, when I would have been in the camp of like a third-party cookie-based tracking. It's just a bunch of IDs in a database. It doesn't tell you anything about these people. There's no names in there. There's no addresses. There's no phone numbers. There's no ages. There's nothing about these people except these, very long strings of letters and numbers. But ad tech as an industry can be kind of condescending because it's like, oh, there's these, whatever, Tameka, your mom kind of, ad tech tends to characterize a lot of that stuff as kind of like naive paranoia of like, well, you don't have to be so, why do you have to be so paranoid? Nobody's tracking you. But then you read about apps, and for mobile apps in particular, even banking apps, everybody has their app packed with like 50 different SDKs that are all collecting location data, all kinds of telemetry off your phone. Like, my kids, they go to a school that everybody's school, I think, kind of uses like some kind of app now where teachers in the school can communicate with parents. And I don't install that app on my phone, partly because I just have too many apps. I'm just like, I don't need another app. I don't need any more notifications. I don't need more stuff. But I'm also like starting to just get really cynical of like, I know that thing's just payloaded with trackers. Like that's partly how that company is making money. They're giving free communication services between parents and schools, but those apps are all like packed with tracking SDKs. And so my point is, Tameka, is like your mom, and I know you weren't making this point, but a lot of ad tech would make the point that your mom was just being kind of naive and paranoid. She's not at all. They actually are tracking you.
It's the truth. I just covered something that a study Cyber News did of dating apps, and looking at what data they collect through App Store, guidelines, right? Yeah. And they have sexual orientation. They have very sensitive data, ethnicity. Even that can be seen as sensitive nowadays, right?
I mean, I'm sure that's partly why Match, sort of as an entity, right? Match, which owns Plenty of Fish and OkCupid and all the other things. I'm pretty sure that's why Match is a publicly traded company and has a fairly large market cap, right? Because they have, in addition to people looking for love, they've got a ton of data and they target and retarget, right? But I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, but that's the point. Like, they've been sued. There have been breaches, right? There have been privacy complications for many of these companies as well, particularly Match, because they own so many of them. But that is like the point. I'm just piggybacking off the point you guys are making, is there is a reason for consumers to be very concerned.
Right.
So
right?
I have slightly one tangent off of that though, because cookie apocalypse, fine, right? The what do we call them? The cookie walls that come up. I've definitely noticed that when I go to sites in the UK, they're a little bit easier to to parse in terms of they're very clearly being like, hey, we need this information to make our site functional. And will you accept this? They made it super easy. It's like only functional cookies. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I think of with that though is you talked about all of the things that these apps can track, the telemetry, the location, those things. There's some utility there though that I think we have to strike that balance between what's a useful piece of
Yep.
data that an app needs versus not. Because now when I'm on my Mac and I am on Chrome and I go to search for something in Google Maps, it doesn't locate me instantly, right? And I have to then go inside Apple and give it permission. And do I want Google to track me all the time? I mean, I'm within the Google ecosystem. They have all of my
I'm
data.
the same way. I'm like, go ahead and track me.
Right. But like when it comes to, I want Yelp to be able to geolocate the things near me. I don't want that extra click. I don't want the extra click to go tell Apple, yes, it's okay. And so how do you strike that balance between what's necessary data to collect in Web 3.0 versus what's necessary data to collect in Web 2.0?
So two things occur to me. One is, Apple essentially, like one way of looking at the strategic moves Apple has made around privacy is they looked at the business and regulatory landscape in the United States and said, and they're a massive company. So like, they're not a small company. They already have a massive consumer install base. And they said, oh, wow, there's no federal privacy regulations in this country. We can step in as the owner, like we control like how many, I mean, what, 50, 75%? I don't know what their penetration is in the United States for like mobile phone market. It's really high. And they can say, well, we can essentially act as the de facto regulator for this market, which is what they're doing. Like, and so, Tameka, like that's exactly what I sound like. I'm like an Apple PR rep or something, but like that's exactly what they're doing. Is they're saying, well, what are legitimate uses of data? How can we kind of help consumers control in ways that are more useful to them? I mean, and I don't know the details of everything that they've done, but like that's exactly what they're trying to do is like, okay, there are useful uses of data and there are intrusive uses of data or kind of exploitative uses of data. And we need to figure out ways to draw lines between those two things, to give consumers visibility into that line, give them control over where they want that line to fall, et cetera, et cetera. And I look at it and so much of it derives from the fact that we don't have any federal privacy regulation. Like there was literally, it was never going to come from anybody except private industry. And for me, for the health of the industry, the digital advertising, marketing, media industry, I'm like, well, thank goodness somebody is sort of becoming the sheriff in this town, because I'm not sure how much longer the free-for-all model was going to work. It worked for like 10, 15, 20 years, but I don't know how much more. And then the other thing I was going to say, and then Lynn, I know you want to say something. It's like,
no, keep going.
You were also, Tameka, you were just describing, I think, the entire model for a whole raft of kind of zero-party data startups that are out there saying, well, my data does have use, but do I really need to give it to you in order for it to be useful? Can there be something to keep you, the service provider, whether it's Yelp or Google or whoever, at arm's length from my data, but still be helpful to me, and so anyway, there's all kinds of technologies being developed to enable that to kind of sit as almost like an escrow service between your own sensitive data and the outside world that, you want to access services and, buy things, et cetera, et cetera.
You said there's a whole bunch.
I'm like, tell us more about those.
Yeah, I'm like, you said there's a whole bunch of
tell us
market
more about those.
evolving. Like, can you give us an example? Do you know something offhand?
There's a company called Caden, CADEN.
Oh, yeah, they were at that same conference that you were at.
Cadent with a T.
No,
Caden.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we had Caden, Big Token, and Streamlytics.
Okay.
And Reclaim was also supposed to be.
Yeah.
That.
So yeah, there's a bunch of these companies out there. Caden's one of them, where, the premise is keep your personal data personal, and provision it out to service providers in a way that maintains your privacy and allows you to still get that utility back. Because it's just a total reversal of kind of the classic ad tech model is like, well, it's not even give us all your data. It's that we will observe all your data without you knowing, and then we're gonna like provide value back to you, which is
some form of value.
some form of value. You're gonna get it. Don't worry. You'll get the value back. But we've already got the data. So the minute you opened your browser, we got all your data. Too late.
It's
So-
all going. Go.
So I think that's a really interesting and good segue, because we've talked about a little bit about privacy sandbox. We knew we were going to get super nerdy and wonky in this combo, right? With the three of us.
Of course, with Myles, yes.
But I think, Myles, what we really kind of wanted to talk about was, okay, so this is how it has been done, right? Data free for all, we're running amok, we're sharing, we're doing all kinds of stuff. There's brokers. You said third-party data. I'm like, shucks. The dark web is the third party that half of my data is on now at this point because of various data breaches. And I love the analogy you made about Apple kind of being the sheriff and being like, hey, I can see the future and we need to change it. You also now have Google seeing a future that is dominated by generative AI and video and social, that is no longer searchable in the same way that it was, right? The notion of us putting something into a browser and saying, I want to find this it's a behavior that we've had for, like, let's say the past 20 years. It's not going away, but you've got an entire generation of, you two have children. How do your children search? Do your children search? And if so, how and what do they search on?
Yeah, I mean, my oldest daughter is 10, so she's like just sort of starting to use the internet. And so, but I mean, even at her age, there's things that I'm just like, how do you know about that thing? And I'm always asking her, because she's like young, and I'm like, well, how is it someone who's as young as you are is learning about things? I wish I had like an anecdote to throw out. I don't. Yeah, I mean, I am of the belief that AI is, and I think like Google, I'm sure, sort of knows this. They're not stupid. It's not a matter of knowing it. It's a matter of being able to adapt to the future fast enough. I'm sure Google knows that, Tameka, what you characterize, this behavior that we've had for 20, 25 years of going to a search bar and searching for something and then manually scanning through results. So you got to click out to multiple websites. Each one of those websites, you're going several pages deep into it. And I think in the world of AI, that's all going to start to seem very, very tedious and a waste of time. Why am I still doing this? Clicking around. How much of our lives are we wasting clicking around the internet? And like, my thing with the ad industry is, every time you're clicking and performing one of those little micro tasks, you are being served ad impressions. It doesn't matter if you're a search platform, you're on a publisher, you're in your social feed, you are like scrolling with your thumb, you're clicking, you're just taking little micro actions to perform tasks online or consume content. And every single time you do that, it's another opportunity to show you an ad impression. And that's literally what adds up to almost the entire digital ads market, like the value of the entire market. And so you're like, yeah, these little micro tasks that spawn ad impressions, because the ad impressions get sold, and that's where the entire industry makes its money.
Wow.
And so I'm just like, okay, well, as people perform progressively fewer micro tasks because they've got AI to do things for them, what is that? I don't think it's going to like kill the ad industry. I think the ad industry is just going to shift in some other new direction. And that's the part that I don't have full clarity into, of like, well, what is the new direction it goes into when the entire industry can't rely on, whatever it is, 5 billion humans on Earth pecking around on screens all day.
Right. I mean, I think that's an interesting question, Tameka, you asked. As you know, Tameka, I have a teenager.
Yeah.
Right? And he uses TikTok for like, that's
Everything.
Yeah, that's how he comes to know about everything. And that's where he
Hmm.
searches for things. A little bit of IG, but mostly TikTok. And I will say I've used YouTube a lot, right? For various things, right? Like, how do I do this thing? How do I
Hmm.
do that thing? Right? I use YouTube. Um, but lately I've been using are you guys familiar with the Perplexity search engine?
I
So
haven't used it yet. Familiar.
so I've been using Perplexity for a
Look at
while. I have the app, I have everything. And I've been using it. And what I like about Perplexity as compared to using a chat GPT
Yeah.
or something like that is that when I search for something, it gives me the sources, right? Because part of the problem that I think with the death of Web 2.0, like digital media relies on discovery, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
And so it needs search engines, it
Hmm.
needs social media, right?
Hmm.
And part of the reason that digital media is afraid of AI
Hmm.
because it realizes that AI can take that shortcut, right?
Hmm.
And so what I've liked about Perplexity is that it still provides like footnotes or source, citations within the text. It gives you the sources, and now it even gives you cards. It gives you cards, on top of the result that is a small paragraph explaining whatever you asked for. The other thing that's cool about Perplexity, I just recently learned, people who use, I don't know, what is Microsoft's browser, Edge? People who use Edge can, I think, add Perplexity as their search engine.
Hmm.
And I just found, because I use Chrome very often, that I added last night Perplexity as my search, but I had to add a Chrome extension to make it
Hmm.
work. So my searches are still in my Google history, but I'm using Perplexity to search. But
Wow.
the thing that's fascinating is like, is the death of search, is that happening? Is it too early to tell?
Death of Search 2.0,
Yeah,
right? Death
search
of Search,
2.0. What
the death of search, because
2.0? So searching on social media, searching on search engines. And is this why Google has now like figured out how to, they're rushing to get this Gemini thing up, which we can talk about Gemini too woke later. Um, but yes, is that why Google's trying to get ahead of the game? Because there are all these independent companies popping up who
Yeah.
are
wow.
trying to, yeah.
Well,
What do you
and
guys think about
I
that?
mean,
Yeah.
well, if you just look at Google's own origins, which I was somewhat young at the time, I was only in my early 20s, so I wasn't intimately familiar with any details, but like they came practically out of nowhere and took over the search market like very quickly because they
Yep.
were so much better
Then
than,
web crawler.
yeah, Yahoo or whatever it was.
Yahoo.
Everybody was kind of doing
Who's
the,
Yahoo?
they had like the
Web
Dewey
crawler.
Decimal System, like a library.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, Google's got to be concerned that one of these browsers could just like come in and like totally upend their market share overnight. I've been thinking a lot about like what what discovery like is going to look like in an era with AI. And one of the things that I like happened upon pondering this a few days ago was just in the case of shopping. Um, and there's one model where maybe you'll have AI do your shopping for you, which has all sorts of questions because it's like, well, what if you don't like what it buys? And like it gets kind of like messy because it's spending money and you're gonna have to process returns and like there's all this kind of messy stuff. But I think that is one possible model. And that really does mess up the web because you literally just like talk to your phone and say, hey, I need some new pants. You know what I like. Just buy me some stuff and ship it. I'll ship back what I don't like, which is kind of how people already shop anyways. If you look at like the way people buy off of whatever Temu and Shine, it's a very kind of like we've been now trained to make it a very throwaway experience. So then you're like, well, why does a human need to be actually doing the purchase at all if it's such a throwaway experience for people? That's one model. But the other one is instead of like going to a store, so a website, a store, you just ask your AI to make you a store. You know what I like. I need new shoes. Make me a shoe store right now. Just go find shoes from various retailers that you know that I like because you like my taste because you have access to all my zero-party data. Just make me a store and I'll go browse, and that will be a really fulfilling experience to me because it's going to be an amazing store, like an amazing furniture store, an amazing bookstore, an amazing whatever electronic gadget store, video games, whatever it is you're into. It's going to be a store that was made right then just for you. And so then you're still going through the process of like digital discovery, but you're not going to a site. You're just having an AI like craft a world that's perfect for you and bringing it right to you, which I think is like, it sounds like Perplexity is like almost taking like, and there, I know there's similar browsers taking like baby steps in that direction.
Right. This almost sounds to me like virtual kitchens. Are you guys
Not
familiar
virtual, you're
with this?
talking about ghost kitchens?
Ghost kitchens,
Ghost
yeah.
kitchens? Yeah.
Virtual
Yeah.
kitchens.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Lynn, sorry.
No, keep going.
I think Miles, wow, so the first scenario, I'm like, fuck that. I don't like the first scenario you said, because I mean, I think of like, if I think when of the obnoxiousness of like using Instacart, for example, and and the stupid decisions that a human actually makes when I'm like, no, I want this loaf of bread. And then if there's an alternative, don't get me 2 giant loaves of bread, right? So
Right.
the first scenario, no. Second scenario is super interesting. This idea of these curated shops for yourself, so that
Yeah.
I don't have to do all of this. I don't have to do the initial searching, right?
Right.
The AI is trained on what I like and what I'm interested in, sort of crawls these various retail databases, because that's
Yeah.
how it would have to be, right? Crawls these various retail databases and then creates a shop for me. That's interesting. We have a couple of questions in that though, right? On the one hand is, because when you try to shop locally, for example, it's really difficult with regular search, because
Yeah.
the inventory issue of, especially,
Yep.
like, where is that database and how
Yep.
real time are these various stores
Yep.
databases upheld? So that's one. I think we could solve that. But then and we segue into the soul part of the conversation, right? I think of the discovery piece. Because if this AI is curated to know exactly what I like and is curated on my taste, how do I find new things? How do I find things that might delight me that are not within my consideration set? How do if it knows I love nails and I love pixie cut hair and I love R&B, how does it not create a silo for me? And how do I, one, get exposed to new things? And then two, how do new and small retailers get surfaced into this?
God, wow. I mean, isn't that in a way something that Pinterest does now, or like even Amazon? Like, we know you like these things. Here, like with their recommendation engines, here
Yeah.
are some other things that we think you might like as well, right? And then if you ignore those things or say, no, don't show me this again, right? That's even like with ad choices with Google, right? It's Google that has the ad choices.
That never worked well. Let's be clear.
I mean, it's even like that, like, right? So if you don't like any of these things, then it knows, okay, that's not the direction to go in. Let's try this other direction, right? That's what I'm thinking, is that the AI gets smarter.
But
the
it
more
hasn't. Let's be clear, because on IG it doesn't work that well. On LinkedIn it doesn't work that well. And we're not talking about generative AI. Let's talk about sort of the LLMs and sort of algorithms that power the social tools that we use now. I tell LinkedIn a bunch of times, I don't want to see this possible conference ad. I've seen it enough times. I refresh my feed, possible worldwide, possible. And I'm just like, honestly, what is, so anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't have faith that the AI will actually listen, number one. And then two, again, I guess the other question I was getting at is, going back to social and the algorithm and how divisive they have become, and how you can, I read these stories of people who've become radicalized because of the content that continuously gets fed to them. In this world where I have this AI shopping bot, which I do like the idea of this. Again, I guess the question I will ask again of Myles and Lynne is how does that, what happens to the independent creator? What happens to the independent, shop owner? What happens to the independent publisher in this world?
I think the question around like independent shop owners, like local stores, is a really good one. And like because it's not going to be, it's already not easy for those companies to kind of participate in digital commerce. Like if you physically have to, if you want to know what that store has in stock and you want to know what it's like to walk around that store, you physically have to go over there. God, I swear I read something. I thought about this years ago, but I swear I even read something about Google building maybe a robot or something that could actually go into the store. It's almost like do Street View for inside the store, which I wouldn't be surprised if they end up doing that, if they do Street View for inside stores. It's kind of a natural step. I think that's valid. And I think the whole echo chamber thing is valid because, I've also been thinking about, partly in preparation for this podcast, is like, with respect to you in particular, Lynn, is like, what does AI do to publishing and publishers? And I was like, okay, well, I don't think the website is going to be the thing anymore in digital publishing. I don't think people are going to go to websites and read websites anymore. There'll be some of that, but I don't think that's going to be how people kind of like, all right, well, oh, what's in the New York Times today? That means I got to go load the New York Times. I got to scroll through it. It's the anti-perplexity experience. It's like, well, the information's out there, but you got to go look for all of it. We're not going to bring it to you. You got to go to it. And then I was thinking, well, with AI, you have the possibility, like how did we consume we consume news, for instance, in the broadcast television era? And how did you consume news? Sure, you went to a channel and you watched a news program, but how are you really consuming it? It was Tom Brokaw or somebody like that. That was how you consume news, with Tom Brokaw. Whatever he chose to tell you that night, which it wasn't his personal decision, but whatever came out of his mouth that night, that was news to you. And everything that he didn't say was not news to you. You just didn't know about it. And I was thinking, like, I wonder if one of the experiences that people will have with publishing going forward is, it's kind of like the, hey, make a store for me. And I don't think it's like make a TV anchor for me, but in a sense it kind of is, because now also people have been trained to consume everything from creators. Everything we consume now, like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, just so much of digital media has now trained us that there are no longer these kind of monolithic media properties like, the New York Times or whatever. It's like, no, you need to have some creators that you follow and you engage with, and they're the ones who sort of give you information and you engage back with them. And I was like, well, I think AI characters are going to step in and be able to do that. And that may be the new front end of a publisher. It's no longer a site. It's embodied as a character or series of characters. I mean, you could basically say, like, I really don't like the way news is done. Like, can you make me a Tom Brokaw news? I'm 80 years old and I missed that era. Can I just have that back? And the AI is like, oh yeah, you can. We can totally make Tom Brokaw for you. We'll pick the news that Tom Brokaw would have picked if he was still doing the news, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it's this pie in the sky stuff, but it's just, as I'm thinking about where the technology will meet how people want to interact with the digital world, that was one of the places my mind went.
But then I think it's not going to be, sorry, Lynn, I have to interject with a weird thought. I think it's not going to be Tom Brokaw. I think it's going to be like these weird little giant anime virtual chatbots, right?
But did you guys already hear about this channel 1? I don't know what channel 1 is, but AI generated news anchors are becoming a reality with Channel One
Yeah.
set to launch. Yeah, you heard about this, right? The world's first AI powered news network. The avatars created from scans of real people with digitally generated voices will deliver news devoid of real emotion. The network plans to provide personalized news coverage sourced from legacy outlets, freelance journalists, and AI generated reports from public records and
Yeah.
government documents.
And it's only a small step before it has emotion. Like they have some facsimile of emotion based on their training data, which, take Google, for example. How much training data does it have from YouTube, from human emotion being expressed over video? Trillions and trillions of hours of human emotion that it can be trained
Wow.
on for any emotional state, any kind of, response that you're trying to provoke with the audience, et cetera, et cetera. But Tameka, to your point about like, it's not going to be Tom Brokaw. It's totally not going to be Tom Brokaw. I'm just trying to, because that's the big question of like, well, what is the Tom Brokaw? Like we have, one of the things I repeat a lot is that, Mr. Beast is today's Merv Griffin. So like Merv Griffin created all the most famous game shows in like the 70s and 80s. Like, I mean, that guy practically invented television as a lot of us knew it growing up. And he's out of the picture, and the old broadcast TV model and network TV model is going
Rapidly.
away. And what's replaced it? It's somebody like Mr. Beast. It's the same kind of stuff, though. He spectacle. It's just spectacle that fits the format of YouTube, fits the format of mobile video, fits the format of whatever short attention spans, fits the it's something my 10-year-old would watch. Even though actually I will say she watches The Price is Right, and she watches like old episodes of this stuff. It's very funny. But no, Tameka, yeah, who knows what it's gonna be, but it'll be for you, whatever it is you want to have giving you content. Because like I open up YouTube, or like Tameka, you kind of just made the case of like I open up LinkedIn, or I open up Instagram, or whatever platform it is, and it doesn't feel like it's for me. I keep telling it what I don't like, and it still doesn't quite feel like it's for me. And I think AI is going to put that on steroids. Of it is going to be exactly whatever you want it to be.
Okay. So that, and I see Tameka has something too, but think of this stuff that's happening with Gemini right now, right? So in the past, historically, Google, experimentation with AI, images, everything was a white person, right? So now Google, to correct this, they have maybe done some overcorrecting, right? Where the models are trained on more diverse imagery. And this is something I brought up to you before, Myles, too. I was like, every time I use AI to create an image, there's no diversity. So you're saying feed it what it wants, but then it's still what it's being trained on,
Yeah.
right? And it's still the engineers that are training, that are deciding what it should be trained on. So there's still that aspect of it. So I still have concerns there about, and
Yeah.
this is another part of our podcast, the bias that
Well,
could be inherent, right?
even and this is not to debate your point, but I just, the whatever, my like engineering hat comes on, and I'm like, well, what if you trained it on data that wasn't so old? You trained it on data from TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, only from the last, say, 5 years. And how much would that theoretically, I would hope, improve that type of stuff?
But
Where you're training it on a much more diverse group of creators who have much more diverse opinions, views, experiences. Anyway, sorry, this just occurred to me, Lynn, of like, there's these, and I'm not saying that those aren't issues and that they won't continue to be issues. I'm just literally thinking of like, if I was training those models, how might I like try to fix that? Because they tried to fix it by giving it an explicit rule
Right.
of like, oh, well, you need to you need to have diverse people in the images that you're generating, which a lot of people reacted badly to, because you were putting people essentially in the quote unquote wrong context. And people were like, well, wait, why are you putting a person of this particular ethnicity in this context? It's totally not the image I wanted. And Google's like, oh, damn it, our rule didn't work. It had unintended consequences. And I mean, this is one of the limitations of like, yeah, trying to program rules into this versus just training it off of, one would hope, better data, like whatever from the recent past.
But, and I think that that's the piece that's the question that I have, or one of the thoughts is, and I don't know who said this, I need to pull up the article, but it was like, how bland and terrible is kind of the web or search going to be if it's only trained on sort of this old subset of information? But I would argue, how bland and terrible is it going to be if it's only trained on the past 5 years? Okay, this is post-pandemic world. Let's be clear. Post-pandemic, post-Trump, post-Putin, post all of this. So again, on the one hand, you've got definitely more diverse voices. You've got people that are much more conscious, but you also have, again, the raging asshole echo chamber and like and pulling that into the feed. How does you know?
I mean, well, this is the tragedy of just digital. Like, take your pick.
Or you go back to,
they're both horrible.
I think of one thing of when you go back to, you said the fact that your child likes The Price is Right, right? Like there's something also kind of magical and nostalgic about old school content, right? There's something, do I think we need to have 15 Prices Right remakes? No, but I think that there's, you know, there's something to be said for not throwing out everything that we've come along with. And I think that may be a good place for us to table this conversation. Myles, as I expected, we could probably go for an hour. We definitely have to have you back. Actually, I think what we probably
Part two.
have you in our in-person AI versus everybody session. Any last closing words or anything you want to share with the audience? How can people get in touch with you, Myles?
So I personally, very easy to find on the internet and LinkedIn. U of Digital is at uof.digital. We put out a weekly newsletter. I invite everybody to subscribe to uof.digital/newsletters. And you know, we look forward to hearing from any folks who hear this. And thank you both for having me on. This is super fun. I knew it would be, and it was.
It was great. Yeah.
Stop recording.